Hello and welcome to another episode of Trash to Track. In this episode we're going to be looking at a Black 5, that one there on the box cover, that's been sent in by Gerry, and Gerry says he'd like it to be serviced and also that there's something wrong with the side rods. The alternate names and number stickers are present on this model, which is unusual for a model of this age, and you can immediately see the problem with the side rods there. They're all gummed up, there's bits missing on one side and there's a rivet seems to be missing from the other side. Now in these old boxes I always like to take the polystyrene off to see if there's anything underneath, and there we go, always something. There's some more stickers for the alternate numbers. Sometimes there's paperwork and all sorts under those, so it's always worth having a look. Now with this era Hornby Black 5, this front pony wheel that's been put on upside down and the tender shell's loose, so somebody's been looking at this model before me. But I was saying these Black 5s from this era with the Silver Seal model motor are permanently coupled through wires through the loco and tender, much like the Fleischmann model we looked at a few episodes ago. So giving it a battery test, it is trying to run, but ain't going to get very far with the side rods in the condition they're in. So we'll give this a complete strip down, give it a good service and find some new rodding for this loco. Now I'm going to take this off first off by undoing this small flat-headed screw which releases the centre crank pin, and the other crank pins are built into the side rods, to remove the spacer. And then I'm going to remove the chassis plate here with the pickups on it, and I'm also going to remove the front bogie. We'll put that back on correct way up when we reassemble it. And I'm also undoing the screw under the cab, which allows the body shell to be removed. And then hopefully I will be able to undo that keeper plate, as I said, and feed it through and separate the loco from the tender, because they're not easy to work on when they're permanently coupled like this. So now that that's off, I think I can feed it through, but I think it's a bit too big for that hole there where the axle is. So I'm going to end up having to cut that, I think, to cut the wire to get it separate. And as you can see there between the loco and tender, this model has been apart before. Somebody's cut that wire and put it back together with some heat shrink. So I'm going to cut it there at the join just with these snips, and that will free the tender and the loco section. And now I can take it apart, so I might even rewire this model completely to give it some new wire and make the joints all nice. You can see there as well, I don't know if you just caught that under my hand there, that the tender chassis frame is actually cracked, so I'm going to have to look at repairing that as well. So like I said, as with the Fleischmann, you remove the tender weight that then allows the motor unit to drop out from underneath. So we'll turn that round, and it's virtually a carbon copy of Fleischmann's. Now I have read online and in books that when Hornby did these Silver Seal, that's one of the missing rivets off the side rod, so it was actually stuck to the magnet. But I was saying that when I've read online that there was some sort of threat of legal action maybe when Hornby released these Silver Seal models in the 70s from Fleischmann, as they'd obviously reversed engineered and used Fleischmann's patent, but how true that is I really don't know. So taking the motor faceplate off, the commutator is extremely dirty. There is a thick band of black gunk around the outside, and indeed this brush retainer was so stiff that the spring was in there. It was all gunked up with horrible black carbon. And this wiring on here, the solder job, that leaves a lot to be desired, so we're going to have to tidy that up. So using a cotton bud with some meth, I'm going to attempt to remove as much loose dirt and detritus from this commutator as I possibly can. And also the inside of the magnet, look at that, it is just caked in this black, horrible black stuff. Now, I can, if I remember rightly, if I remove this centre wheel, this is just a press fit, so you can gently ease it off with a flat bladed screwdriver. The whole motor assembly, look at the dirt on there. Oh, that's horrible. But anyway, the whole motor assembly will lift out like that, and it makes it relatively easy to service. I can remove the magnet, and there the commutator sits and the armature, and there's just so much dirt on this model. I know somebody's been in here before because of the dodgy soldering joints and that, but I don't know when this was last serviced. I mean, the muck on the inside of this magnet, it was just thick. The carbon was thick and black, and that should be clean, that magnet. There shouldn't be anything on there, but look at that. It really was quite bad. So to get the worst off the commutator, I'm going to use this fiberglass pencil and polish up the commutator faceplate. And then once that's done, I am going to clean out the gaps. Now the gaps on this were full of carbon. They would cause poor running and possible short circuits if you don't clean all this out. But you can see there just how nice and shiny this commutator faceplate has come up. And we'll have a look at the motor housing now. I'm just going to use a cotton bud of meths again to clean out any dirt that's on this. Everything needs to be clean, ready for reassembling. And I'm also going to remove the wheels because that middle axle, so there's a double O gauge bird's nest there. Yeah, that middle axle was very grimy and dirty, so it goes without saying that the other two axles will be. So I'm going to strip these off and give them a good clean. And there's another one of those little tiny bird's nests made out of carpet fibres. So I'm now going to remove that clip. Now some people don't remove that clip. I find if you work gently with a pair of long nose pliers you can remove that. And I'm just still thoroughly cleaning everything. There's a few fibres, but there's a lot of sticky black residue all over it, and you can see there actually on, not on this side, but on the other side there where the gears have gone, where they've worn the motor housing there. So I'll give the gears a good clean up as well. Now there's no flashing on these. I didn't give them any sort of sanding down or anything because there was no flashing on them. But now everything's cleaned. I'm going to put a tiny spot of Labelle 106 grease on that spindle. Put that cog back. And then get in this small clip. Is it a Jubilee clip they call it maybe? I'm not sure. But that goes on there, and just holding it in place, I just slide it down gently with the pressure from a screwdriver. And working slowly, eventually it will clip into place. And I can fully understand why people don't take these off, because they are a bit of a pain to get back on. But that one's gone on nicely and the gear's free running. So I'm going to clean the axles up now again with my normal method of cotton bud and meths. Get all that grease and horrible grease and congealed oil off the axles. And then I'm going to put some grease on that spindle and on the other one and put these two gears back in place. Make sure they're seated correctly. And then I'm going to replace the two outer axles only, because if you replace the middle axle you won't get the motor back on. But before that, with a pin dropper, small amount of oil onto those bearings so that when the wheels are pushed through, they are correctly lubricated, as they are metal axles running in metal bearings, so they do need some sort of lubrication. And there we go. The traction tyres on this model were in very good condition. They were very tight to the wheel, not corroded, they weren't perished, so I left them as they were. And then I'm just going to push the wheels together, and then when all 6 wheels have been put back on the tender, I will check the gauges with my digital calipers. So that's the outer wheels back on, and now small amount of oil onto that centre bearing and the drive cogs on the worm gear, on the motor. Put the motor back in place. The motor will only go back in place one way. It is made so it will fit a certain way into the housing, just like so. And compare that to when I open the model, that commutator is practically gleaming, and that that gear just fell off there because the wheel isn't in place. Small amount of 106 grease on the worm drive and on the edges of the gears, so that when it runs round, it spreads out onto the drivetrain, and this grease really does spread out nicely. It's just thick enough not to spray everywhere. So the motor faceplate was given a clean up. This had a dark ring of carbon deposits around it where the motor's been running. So this was all cleaned up. The front was also given a going over. and then this was replaced back onto the motor there, and the 3 retaining screws were then tightened up, and the motor, apart from the brushes and springs, the motor is now reassembled. So to clean up the brushes, I would have let these to soak, but the brushes themselves weren't too bad. They were not, it was only on the ends where they came into contact with the commutator that were slightly gunky. The rest of them weren't too bad. They weren't oily or anything. So I know I keep saying it, but I really should invest in a sonic cleaner for some of these metal parts. I've seen other people use them, and they look to be very good. So the brushes and springs were put back in, and these brass retaining clips were put back on, and then just gently squeezed to tighten them up. And a battery test, and the motor is spinning nicely, even though you can't see it because I've not got it facing the camera the right way, so you can't see the gears turning around. But it was running nicely. Now this, like I said, this tender frame is cracked and the coupling is broken, so I'm going to put some super glue on the inside of that tender frame, using this this old pin to drop it in the cracks. And then while the glue was wet, I added a small amount of baking powder to form a strong chemical bond, and that's the white stuff you can see on the tender frame there. This is after it's dry. So now that it's dry, I've put the tender frame over the motor again. I'm just cleaning the inside of the weight. You don't have to, but I like to have everything nice and clean. And then the weight is replaced, and again, just as Fleischmann, there is a die cast channel in the weight for the wires to run through. So that was put back, and then the 2 retaining screws were then tightened up, and that is the tender virtually rebuilt. So after I've done this, we will have to turn our attention to the pickup wheels and look at replacing those broken side rods. So the wires feed through this hole here. I did think I rewired this model, but obviously not. I'm doing the voiceover about 3 weeks after I've actually filmed it, because I've done 2 or 3 trash tracks in one go. But yeah, anyway, we'll turn our attention now to the front part. This was generally in good condition. It was very dirty, as this model was. So I stripped everything off, just left the driving wheels in place. I'm going to give this a good spraying with the WD-40 contact cleaner. Then I'm going to set it aside and leave it to dry. Now that's had a clean with that, and you can see the remnants on the bottom there. All 3 axles are extremely free rolling. So I'm going to turn my attention, I'm going to clean the pickups. The brass on this had tarnished badly. So I'm just polishing this up with the fiberglass pencil to bring the brass back up to a nice shine, and then removing any of the fibres with a meth dampened cotton bud. So now I'm going to clean the loco wheels. Again, cotton bud and meths rub around on the wheel treads to clean them all. And also clean the wheel backs where the pickups press onto the wheels, because it does need to be cleaned to ensure good electrical conductivity. And you can see there on that cotton bud just how much dirt and grime is coming off these wheels. It's parts of them are absolutely caked in this black horrible carbon deposit stuff. Just cleaning all the fluff and detritus off the motion bracket before I refit that. That goes in this way with the well, I will do when I get it right. Goes in this way with the, it faces like wings. They face backwards a little bit. That's the best way of describing it. The cylinders were left in place, and I've got some replacement motion and side rods now off an old scrap Black 5. Now, one thing, if you ever have one of these Black 5s, an early Silver Seal model, the side rods on these are the same as the early Hornby Britannias. So if you can't find spares for a Black 5, like I couldn't, I actually went and bought the front end of a Britannia and robbed the side rods off that. Now, they are slightly tarnished, but they are better, and they're in better condition and actually working. So I'm going to fit these. So putting them in the cylinders, I then line them up and push the end tabs into the motion bracket, and then screw that additional weight piece down. That weight piece is designed to sit where the old XO4 motors would have been mounted on these chassis blocks. As like I've just said, these chassis blocks were shared between a couple of engines, and they probably originate with Triang. So the connecting rods are going on, and you've got to get the correct hand, and you've also got to get the correct orientation. The tiny square bit that faces upwards, that's an oil pot representation, and that should face up. Then the spacer piece goes on, and then the piston rod, which is a very simple affair, that just goes onto the slide bar. When I can line it up, goes onto the slide bar into the cylinders, and then underneath the linkages. I really need thinner fingers to do this. And then the linkages are put on, and there is a rectangular tab on top of the crank pin. It sits on there, and then you can gently tighten up the crank pin screw. And the same was repeated for the other side of the model, and that completely rebuilt the side rods. So now pushing the model up and down the test track, it's extremely free running, nothing is binding, so the side rods and the quartering is all good. I'm just going to add a small amount of oil onto these axles, as the contact cleaner would have washed away any old lubrication, so I just want to make sure everything's correctly lubricated before I put that pickup plate back on. And I'm also putting a small amount of oil on the crank pins and the rivets there, just so that everything runs like a Swiss watch. So make sure you put the pickup plate on the correct side. This needs to go onto the insulated side of the model, and you can see that on the axles relatively easily with the big black rubber insulators on the axles. And once that's in place, I screw it back down and connect that solder tab wire, and now everything's back. I'm just going to tin that piece of wire, look, and solder it back on to that tab. So that's one of the pickup wires back in place, and the other one has already been threaded through the chassis. And I can now turn this back round, and they are again permanently coupled. Fresh heat shrink has been applied, and the wires have all been reconnected. I'm just pulling the excess wire up there so it'll be in the body shell. The body shell itself is in very, very good condition. No marks or blemishes. It was just dusty from years of work. The only thing, I say no blemishes, but the only thing was there was a slight build-up of old glue around where somebody had obviously put nameplates in. But just gently prodding it with a screwdriver, it was like a Yoo-hoo type glue that had thoroughly dried over the years, and it came off in one chunk, and it looked a lot better with it removed. So I'm just putting that body shell back on there. Now I haven't put that tender drawbar back on, and I need to screw that on after I've done this. So just pushing those wires up out of the way, and the tender drawbar screws on after you've put the body on. If you do it before, you can't access the screw that holds the body shell in place. So that's that all done. Just push the wires down, and let's give it a test as an 060 Black 5, and it did indeed work. I lost the footage of it running. It was only like a 20-second video, but I don't know why that had disappeared. Before I put the front bogie back on, I'm going to thoroughly clean these wheels, and then also put a small amount of oil on the axles on this, because again it's metal in metal, so it needs some lubrication. That is free rolling now, and then it's reattached with its screw, but this time I'm going to reattach it the correct way up. So that's it. We put it there, and then just tighten up these screws, and that is almost it. We've got to sort out that tender body shell because the clips are broken, and that's a very common thing with tender drive models, because the clips aren't that brilliant, and you have to take them off to service it. Again, the tender body shell is in very good condition, other than a couple of broken clips, and there is a few marks on the side here. So with a warm soapy water on a cotton bud, I'm just going to rub the sides and the innards there, just to get any harder blemishes off that the paintbrush didn't dust away. And that's just so that when this goes back to Gerry, it's in tip-top condition. So tender body shell sits on there, but like I said, the clips are broken. So what I tend to do in this sort of situation is I just got to push the wires down there slightly, is I will put a very, very small amount of Loctite super glue on each of the clips. And when I say a small amount, I'm saying off the head of a pin, and then push it down. And it's a bond that holds it tight, but it also easily broken if you need to service it again. And as you can see here, the Black 5 is now running fine. And you can see there those slightly tarnished replacement valve gears. But these models are getting on now, so spare parts are getting scarce, and you just have to use what you can get, to be honest. But it's not a bad looking model considering its age. And I gave it a spin on Trains for You's test layout when I was there. And it's all ready now to send back to Gerry, and it is fully working and has been restored to its former glory. So if you'd like to contact me or the channel, you can email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. And thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next episode of Trash to Track. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.
Split and the old eyes didn't see it, and then it just split all the way up and just